Hello, this is Anita Bell, the Motown Bell, coming to you live again from Detroit, Michigan. Trying to make a quick video while it's quiet outside. DT is supposedly working on the gas lines, and sometimes they use a jackhammer. So it's been crazy around here. But I wanted to talk with you, an update about solar storms. I wanted to give you this 2013 update because, like many people, we were all thinking that the solar storms and the solar maximum was going to hit in 2012, probably trying to coincide with the Mayan calendar, but that didn't happen. And because the end is near didn't happen in 2012, some people are breathing such a sigh of relief that they're thinking, well, it's not going to happen at all. And so they're taking 2013 for granted. And I wanted to correct that misconception. And part of that correction came in the last chapter of the book, Revealing Mistaken Identities. So I wanted to discuss the last chapter of the book. Urge you to get the book, read the whole book. But some people may want to go to the last chapter and go from the end to the beginning. Some people learn better that way. I do it in chronological order, but if you learn better in reverse chronological order, get the book, read the last chapter first. And then you'll find out what are the consequences, what is the judgment, what are the spiritual ramifications of the mistaken identity that was perpetrated during the slave trade, the mistaken identity being that only the children of Ham were taken as captives as part of the slave trade. If you grabbed a few children of Shem, was there a consequence to that? And I'm saying that there is a spiritual consequence to that, and that goes to Genesis chapter 15. In Genesis chapter 15, God told Abraham that his children were going to become slaves in a strange land that was not theirs. But after 400 years, God would judge the nations that oppressed them, and they would come out with great substance. So that means if these are Abraham's children, these are the children of Shem. Do the children of Shem look that much different from the children of Ham? Considering Abraham was the father of these children of Shem, that's the book. That's the rest of the chapters of revealing mistaken identities. But for some people, they want to see not 400 years ago. What does this have to do with now? What does this have to do with me? What does this have to do with my little world and the next few months, next few years? Some people are very short-sighted, so they don't want the history. They don't want the full story. They want the Cliff Notes. So, all right, this is the Cliff Notes version, and they can read the last chapter and see how all of these things come to a full circle. So, I wanted to warn you. In Ezekiel chapter 33, it talks about if you are one of the watchmen or watchwoman and you see something is about to happen, you sound the warning so that lives can be saved and the blood is not required of your hands. So I'm sounding a warning, and I know that there are many people sounding warnings, that you're going to have some spiritual and some from the scientific community as well. And I appreciate the scientists who are sort of secular prophets, if you will. They're giving predictions. And yes, we do rely on these predictions every day. You watch the weatherman, he lets you know, do you need an umbrella? Do you need suntan lotion? Should you prepare a picnic? Should you just move everybody inside? That's very helpful information. And you use it. So it does help to know the future, even if the future is just the next day or so. That helps. And we do rely on those things. So scientists are a form of prophets, if you will. But the other group of people that you need to look at are the ones in the spiritual community that are looking at prophecy, or as I would like to say, borrowing Ella Hewley's saying, prophecy and history repeat itself. So that if the children of Israel were slaves in Egypt for 400 years, and actually it was 430, and God is a God of details, so yes, 30 years, maybe he was talking about a second slavery. So if you're looking at the spiritual community, then I wanted to talk about some of the resistance to what I have been saying that I get from some people in the Christian community, because when I talk about the solar storms or judgment or any of these types of things, they equate this to meaning, well, you're talking about Jesus coming back, and no one knows the day or the hour Jesus is coming back, and therefore they just tune me out and they don't pay any attention. Those are the people that I worry about most, and some of them are in my own family. Yes, I worry about them the most. There is faith, and I believe in faith. My Hebrew name is Faith, Emunah. I believe in faith. However, in Judaism, there is a faith that is above reason, and that's something in Kabbalah. It's too deep to go into in this particular video. Long story short, there are some people that seem to have a faith that defies wisdom. Let's just call it that. Faith and wisdom go hand in hand, and the wisdom for these particular days is that if someone is telling you that a storm is coming, and the way to protect yourself from a storm is with an umbrella, then wouldn't it be foolish to go outside and say I'm not going to get hit by a raindrop just because I have faith? Does that make sense? Faith also would say, well, a storm is coming. I'm going to get an umbrella, and between God and this umbrella, or God telling me to get an umbrella, I'm going to be all right. And the storm can hit all around me, but I'm going to be all right. That's where some differences in faith come in. So I'm just saying to you that it is time to get an umbrella. Now, what type of umbrella do you use in a solar storm? Well, we know why the solar storm is coming, and I'm saying the spiritual reason for the solar storm coming happens to do with Genesis chapter 15 and what God told Abraham would happen to his children. So that's where the spiritual reason comes in for it. The scientific version of that is that by 2020, there is a 1 in 8 chance of a solar superstorm hitting the Earth. I will repeat, by 2020, there is a 1 in 8 chance, a 12% chance, of a solar superstorm hitting the Earth. So scientists would say 1 in 8 chance. I'm saying that the chance is higher than 1 in 8 because of the biblical prophecies. The biblical prophecies being that 400 years are coming to an end. And so for a group of slaves that were part of the transatlantic slave trade, 400 years has gone and come for the group of slaves that might be in Jamaica, the group of slaves that's in other parts of the Caribbean, the group of slaves that's in Brazil. Brazil was the biggest, had the most slaves come to it. So Brazil, which is still was a part of the Portuguese Empire. Other parts of South America like Colombia and Argentina, all of those places, slavery went on in Europe. All of these different places have come to the end of the 400 years. But the country that has not come to the end of the 400 years happens to be the United States. So the United States wasn't the biggest culprit in the slave trade. So Brazil was the biggest culprit, but the United States happens to be the one that's most prosperous. And so if the 400 years ends for the United States in 2019, and if God doesn't lie, and if I'm not lying that certain blacks, including myself, are part of the children of Israel, then it stands to reason that some kind of judgment is going to happen by 2019. A judgment that could happen would be the solar storms. And the solar storms, of course, would be a big judgment that if it happens to the United States, if it happens to Western Europe, if it happens to those particular areas, it's a big judgment that would be just like Babylon fallen. Now, is the United States Babylon? Well, I intimate in the book, Revealing Mistaken Identities, that the United States could be Babylon, but I also intimate that the Babylon could be the seat of the Holy Roman Empire, which would, of course, be Rome and the Vatican and the Catholic Church. So, depending on which you believe is Babylon, both could fall because if you look at Daniel, especially in chapter 9, the United States could be part of the Holy Roman Empire, as much of Western Europe would be part of that Holy Roman Empire. And if that's the case, then if it falls, one of the ways it could fall could be from a solar storm. That would be a natural disaster of epic proportions, and I would like people to be prepared for it. So, sounding the warning, sounding the trumpet. What could happen in a solar superstorm? Japan is illustrative. Japan is an example. In about 2001, I had a dream, not like Martin Luther King's dream. In this dream, I dreamed that a fireball fell from the sky. It hit the Pacific Ocean. There was an earthquake, which resulted in a tsunami, and the tsunami hit Japan. That was in 2001. I don't remember the day I had that dream. I remember writing it down. I'm still trying to find where I wrote it down, but I just remembered it. And then I saw a scientist, Michio Kaku, who happens to be of Japanese descent. And probably the reason I started paying attention to him was because I had that dream in 2001. And he started talking about solar storms. And it touched me. I paid attention, started paying attention to space weather. There's a website, spaceweather.com. And because sometimes spaceweather.com being related to NASA, because sometimes NASA doesn't tell the truth. So help me, one day spaceweather.com had that we had an X20 solar flare. I can't remember what day that was, but I made sure to copy that page, download that page, save it on my computer. That was a false alarm. It wasn't an X20 solar flare. If it had been, what would we all do? Put on some kind of aluminum foil hats? I don't know. But because spaceweather.com can have either it's hacked or had some kind of errors or minimizing for the purposes of preventing panic. I don't know what was going on. I started looking at maybe the English version of the Russian website, which I believe is Tetsis.com, Tetsis. I'm not sure. I looked at them. I looked at Britain, whatever other space agencies that put a translation in English. I started paying attention to them just in case spaceweather.com is not telling the truth. So, what I noticed on spaceweather.com in March of 2011 is that around March 9th, there was an X flare, and it was directly aimed at Earth. For those of you who aren't familiar, the sun has various flares that come out. The sun is our nearest star. Earth is in a neighborhood called the solar system, and in a universe, and it's a little ball in a huge universe. And the sun is shooting solar flares like a drive-by shooting, and they're random. They're random. It's not like the sun is aiming for us yet, but when it did happen, Earth got shot that particular day on, and it was heading towards Earth. Now the sun is far away from Earth. What's heading toward here, depending on the speed, can get here in a day, 2 days, 3 days. I'm not a scientist. My degree is in law. I can't tell you how fast it takes a flare to get here. All I know is that there was a solar flare on March 9th, and then there was a tsunami and an earthquake that hit Japan on March 11th in 2011. And it caused me to remember the dreams that I had in 2001, 10 years earlier. So that's what I'm saying, and I use Japan then as an example of what could happen here. 10 years has gone by also since the time that there was a blackout that hit the eastern United States and Canada. In 2003, I was in Toronto, Canada, and it was about August of 2003 when the blackout occurred. We just had 3 days of a blackout then. Now, since it was a blackout, I had a cell phone like many people did in 2003, and I'm calling my mother, are you in the dark? And so Detroit was in the dark. I'm in Toronto, she's in Detroit. Detroit's in the dark. Called my cousin in Cleveland. Cleveland's in the dark. Called my sister in New York. New York is in the dark. All of us are on the same grid. That's important because just imagine a solar flare hits, and if it hits the eastern United States and it causes a transformer to go out, all of the people on that transformer are on the same grid, then all of us could be in a blackout. And if it's a transformer blown out or several transformers blown out, then we're in the dark, but it's a darkness that's not going to last just 3 days. It's a darkness that could last a lot longer. It could take months or years to rebuild and replace transformers. If it takes any electricity to even make a transformer, you have to find an area of the world that still has power in order to do that. And then find a way to transfer that transformer to the place that needs it. It could be a major, major problem. But let's just go back to what happened 10 years ago, shall we? In Toronto in 2003, I was living in a building on the 25th floor. The power went out. Let me tell you when the power went out. What was I doing that day? I was at the beauty shop getting my hair done. The woman couldn't finish drying my hair. I didn't have locks at that time. I had a perm. Thank God she was able to finish the perm. But I had my perm. I had curlers in my hair. Dryer went out. Couldn't finish with the curlers in my hair. I'm walking down the street with curlers in my hair. Very vain, very embarrassed. Second, I get to the apartment building. No backup generators. Had to walk up 25 flights of stairs. Great exercise, but wasn't expecting it. Anyway, get to the top of the stairs, and I have roommates in this apartment, and we're all in this high-rise apartment with an electric stove. Well, the food in the refrigerator spoils. The electric stove, of course, you can't cook. You can't microwave. I'm hungry. We had to go back down 25 flights of stairs to go to the pizza parlor. The pizza parlor was on gas stove. I learned then pizza parlors have gas ovens. Ate a lot of pizza during those 3 days. But the other thing was that we had no sanitation for the toilet. So I learned that it took electricity to pump water. Matter of fact, it takes electricity to clean the water in many places because our systems for sewage are based upon very old technology, if they were built and modernized, if you will, around the time of World War One or World War Two, or immediately after World War One or World War Two, then we're talking about sewage systems that are 60 years old or 70 years old or 80 or 90 years old. And then they might not be using the type of modern facilities that would not be reliant upon electricity to clean the water. But let's just go back to Toronto in 2003. In a 25th floor apartment, not able to flush the toilet. Imagine, it's only 3 days. It's only 3 days, but you do use the bathroom at least once during 3 days. And I'm not talking about just number one, I'm talking about number two. Hopefully, you go and do that sometime during 3 days. Hopefully, if you're healthy, you will. And just imagine the smell when people are not able to flush for 3 days. Just imagine the sanitation when you're not able to wash your hands when you go to the bathroom and it's been 3 days. Maybe you remember to go downstairs and buy baby wipes and other things. You know, now we have the little bottles that you can use, waterless type of things, waterless hand sanitizers. Now we have that, but it wasn't as prevalent 10 years ago. So imagine the type of sanitation problems that you have when there is a blackout. And then imagine extending that. How quickly would the United States turn into Haiti after its earthquake if we have no way to clean and pump the water? Would we be looking at dysentery? I learned during that Toronto example in 2003 that subways depend on electricity. Hopefully, a solar flare would not cause a geomagnetic storm that affects the pipelines, because pipelines are also sensitive to the pipelines are in the ground. The solar storm is doing something magnetic. I'm not a scientist, I'm a lawyer, so it's doing something magnetic. The pipelines are in the ground, something goes on there. If it disrupts oil and natural gas in these pipelines, then in addition to being in the dark, we may also be cold. And our ability to transport from truck or whatever else is going on, our ability for transportation might be hindered. And gasoline could become super expensive. Heating oil could become super expensive. And if you're in a place built at a time period where they were not putting fireplaces in the houses, at once upon a time, fireplaces were used for warmth. But when we became more technologically advanced, now fireplaces are just there for beauty. And so a lot of places don't have fireplaces. My house that I'm living in now, no fireplace. It has a chimney, but no fireplace. So what would you do for warmth if you don't have natural gas and your furnace is not able to work? People in cold climates could be very at risk. What would you do without electricity for people who are dependent on it for health reasons? Whether you are on dialysis, whether you need oxygen, whether you have a CPAP for sleep apnea, whether you have an IV and you're on an IV, what would you do? What do the hospitals do when it's past 3 days and the backup generators are not able to keep all of these things running? What do you do if you need a surgery? What do you do when you need to have that robotic arm do those complicated surgical things? What do you do when you need an MRI or a CAT scan? Any of those things. Just the hospitals. What do you do? We also discovered during an extended blackout, or just a 3-day blackout, that if the electricity is out, the economy comes to a grinding halt. your automatic deposit or direct deposit, how does it get into your checking account? How can you go and get money from the ATM? No electricity. There's no internet either. And yes, we depend on the internet for information, for even games, if you will. But what can you do when the economy is in a binding and grinding halt, and you go to the bank and you say you're talking to a teller face to face, but she cannot tell you how much money is in your accounts. You can't even make a withdrawal because she doesn't know how much is in there. He doesn't know how much is in there. So there's no way of telling. All of that is electronic now. The computers are able to update automatically. So if there was a deposit or a withdrawal, they can give you that information up to the second. Are there any books in the bank anymore where you can see what was happening even yesterday, let alone an hour ago? How can you see that now? It's all electronic. And if the electricity goes, that can put the economy in a grinding halt. How can you collect taxes? How can you do a transaction even at Walmart? What are you going to pay with? The only money you might have is the money that's in your pocket. So what do you do? What do you do? Would people go to work? They don't know how they're going to get paid. And if people don't go to work because they don't know how they're going to get paid, how are the hospitals going to treat the sick? How are the police officers and firefighters and emergency medical technicians, would they come to work? How would you even have government able to continue its operations? Who's going to pick up the trash? Would there even be gas for them to run the garbage trucks? How long will it take for rats to invade and other things to just go haywire? We can survive. We can survive. Okay, if you live near water. I'm in Detroit. There's 5 Great Lakes around Michigan. Most of us, if we're healthy, we can get to some kind of body of water. And I don't know, it won't be clean, but it's water. What do you do? We can go back to candles. We can go back to lighting fires. We can go find a place that has a fireplace. We can go back to all of that. We have done without cell phones 150 years ago. It's an inconvenience, but we can go back without telephones, without electricity. But the biggest danger, and this is where Japan is so illustrative, that the biggest danger is the nuclear apocalypse. That is a big danger because in the United States alone are approximately 1/4 of the world's nuclear reactors. That's a lot. That's over 100. And you have 1/3 of the U.S. population living within 50 miles of a nuclear reactor. So nuclear power was thrusted upon us as a way of supposedly making electricity cheaper. It's supposed to be safe, but we do know that it can destroy the world. And literally, that can happen. You just look at Japan. What has happened? They did have a tsunami. The tsunami caused those nuclear reactors in Fukushima. Hope I said that right. It caused those nuclear reactors in Fukushima to start melting down. And as they start melting down, the nuclear protocols for safety that are used even in the United States call for an evacuation of the people who live within a 10-mile radius, because those who live within a 10-mile radius are the ones in danger of nuclear radiation. However, those who live within a 50-mile radius of a nuclear reactor are in danger of nuclear fallout. that nuclear fallout can affect the air, so what you breathe, it can affect the water, and that would include not just what you drink and washing yourself, but water starts affecting the animals and the plants that we consume. And because it can affect the animals and plants that we consume, the nuclear fallout can affect the ground. So if you live within 50 miles of a nuclear reactor, just like the people who live within 10 miles, you need to evacuate. Here's the problem. If 120 million people, or approximately 1/3 of the American population, live within 50 miles of a nuclear reactor, it becomes prohibitively expensive to evacuate millions of people. That's expensive. Where are they going to go? Who's going to do the evacuation? And you know how the American government thinks. Who's going to pay for it? They don't even want to pay $100 million or whatever amount Barack Obama is proposing to upgrade the infrastructure. That would be prevention. If you don't want to prevent the disaster, sure enough, you're not going to want to pay for after the disaster. You're not going to want to pay for the health care when people exposed to nuclear fallout and nuclear radiation become victims of cancer. You don't want to pay that. All of those health care costs, all of the costs of the environment, just the cleanup alone, who's going to pay for that? Talk about, even if the blackout didn't cause the economy to come to such a grinding halt, the repair is going to be expensive. If you thought Hurricane Katrina was expensive, it will look like spitting in the ocean compared to this. That's a way for Babylon to fall. That's a judgment. And it can affect the countries that are dependent upon nuclear power. Nuclear power is such a beast that even if they say, all right, today is August 15th, 2013, we're going to turn off the nuclear reactors. A nuclear reaction, and the scientists can help me with this, degree in law, not science, but I read that a nuclear reaction could take years to stop. So that even if you turned off all the reactors today, you have to still keep cooling down the nuclear power plant for years, because the reaction that goes on in a nuclear reaction, which is why we use it for electricity, that reaction can be self-perpetuating to an extent. Now, if it takes 10, 20, 30 years to stop, then that's not perpetual, that's not everlasting, but for the purposes of this example, that's a long time. So that if you turned them off today, we're still in danger within the next 10 years. And scientists have predicted that there could be a solar superstorm, a 1 in 12 chance of a solar superstorm between now and 2020. I told you what's happening in 2019. This could happen before 2020. These are the dangers. So how do you protect yourself? Well, you protect yourself that if there is a major blackout, extended blackout, solar storm, you look on spaceweather.com, you see something is coming, evacuate. Now, hopefully you'll get good information and not false information, not hacked information, not deliberately trying to cause a panic information. I'm not trying to make you panic. I'm just trying to get your head out the sand that if it's coming and you are within 50 miles of a nuclear reactor, prepare to evacuate. How do you evacuate, Nita? Are we going to get on a plane? No, you can't fly a plane because a solar superstorm can knock out navigation. You don't want to be in the ground and you don't want to be in the on the ground immediately under a plane when it doesn't have navigation. So that if the plane is falling out of the air, you don't want to be under it when it hits the ground. So those are the things. You don't want to take a plane. Hopefully buses will still be running if the pipelines haven't been affected adversely, and ships. You brought us over here by ships. Take us back on a ship. You can do it without navigation because you didn't have GPS 400 years ago. You can do it without navigation and get us back to Africa. Africa is a place so far that has not been poisoned with a lot of nuclear power plants. So far. They're trying. They're trying because, they got to get the whole world on this nuclear program. And also the nuclear waste, which can't degrade anywhere. They've been trying to dump it over in Africa. So if you can find a little piece of earth that does not have the poison and toxins from nuclear power, then go to that piece of earth. It looks like you're going to be safe in Australia and New Zealand. It looks like that's not so far exposed to nuclear power to a large extent. And places that are extremely cold, so that it might not be habitable to go to Greenland and those types of places. It's extremely cold there. And if you do not have suitable power, you won't be able to stay warm there. But these are some examples of places to evacuate to. You may have to get there by boat, and it may be a long journey, and so you want to prepare yourself for that too. Just like the ride over here, for those in the transatlantic slave trade, that ride wasn't pretty. The ride back without the same technology that makes a transatlantic voyage now can go in a week. But back then it took months. If it's going to take months again, because you might not be able to get the same type of technology to make the boats go fast like they do now, if it takes months again, you want to prepare yourself for that. There may be a run on shipping, just warning you. But these are the things you may have to do to prepare so that you don't become victims of nuclear fallout and nuclear radiation. So I just wanted to give the warning. It's not easy saying this. It's not, because a lot of people may perish. But you don't have to be one of them. If you heed the warning, if you are prepared, if you take whatever cautions, but you first prepare yourself in your mind. You have to be prepared to leave, like it says, flee Babylon. If the United States is Babylon, if the Holy Roman Empire is the Babylon, whatever you think is Babylon, if you prepare yourself mentally for the idea of leaving, then evacuation, even though it means sacrificing some of what you have, that you won't be able to bring everything with you. What is it worth? Will a big screen TV be worth anything in a extended blackout? Seriously? So are you going to try and carry that 56 or 72 inches with you when you are running for your life? Seriously? Maybe. Some people are so caught up. When the lights come back on, I'll be able to watch the Super Bowl on something that's big. Okay, fine. If that's your priority, oh well. I can't say what's going to happen to you. But for those who have to prepare themselves mentally for the idea of evacuation, then even if you can't take everything with you, try and take everyone with you, everyone you love, even everyone you hate. Take them with you. Save yourself. And I thought I should just warn you, because that was the purpose of putting Revealing Mistaken Identities on Smashwords as an ebook. It's not perfect. Spelling errors, no index, no bibliography. It's not in what would be in a printed book format. But read it while you have internet. Read it while you have electricity, so that you can prepare yourself mentally for what is coming. Thank you, and God bless you.